So there are four major steps to throwing a piece of pottery on a wheel. The first is wedging. That's applying a lot of pressure to get any air pockets out and to kind of make the clay soft and malleable. Step 2 is centering. That's the first step that happens on the wheel, and that's where, again, I'm putting a lot of pressure on this lump of clay that's now soft and centering it on the wheel so then it's ready to then be formed. Step 3 is pulling, and so that's actually taking the lump and actually hollowing out the middle, bringing up the sides, making it into a cylinder as tall as I need the piece to be. And in that way, it's kind of like the starting position of then the final form. And that leads to the last step, which is then forming. And that's where I'm taking that cylinder into the final shape. And this step is much more delicate, and it's about the finishing movements. The clay begins to really look like the final piece at this point. So the first 3 steps of forming on a wheel involve a lot of pressure. It's mostly about pressure, because you're either at the wedging stage, you're folding the clay over and over again on itself. In the second stage, you're centering, which also involves lots of pressure. That's where as a potter, I'm pushing my entire body weight on this little lump of clay to center it onto the wheel until it moves from like a wobble to a still cylinder, even though the wheel's spinning very fast. And I think most potters experience this. You don't realize how much pressure it takes to center even a small lump of clay. It just feels like it's fighting you the entire time. In that very first time throwing, I remember so clearly, wow, like, if God is the potter and I'm the clay, this is me throwing elbows at God when he's trying to teach me something. He's trying to form me. He sees something in me that he wants to draw. He sees he's made me for this purpose or this, or he sees the person he wants me to become, and he is using pressure to bring that out of me. Thankfully, God is a very experienced potter and not new at this. And so I think about that a lot whenever I throw, that God's love takes sometimes the form of pressure. It can feel uncomfortable sometimes, but it's his persistence and his intentionality with me, informing me and shaping me, because he sees, who he's created me to be, or he sees where he wants me to go. His persistence is what helps me grow and what makes me who I should be. As I think about loving other people, sometimes people aren't in a celebratory season, or it's a growing phase, or just hard. They're just in a hard place and they're hurting. But if I'm to be more like Jesus, that means not shying away from questions that might become uncomfortable because it exposes hurt or pain, but actually leaning in, trying to see the vision of who they really are, and with that vision in mind, leaning into that and loving them in that way. I think the challenge for me is, how do I see that person the way God sees them and loves them? How do I emulate that kind of persistence and that kind of love when I try to love the people around me? I really love ceramics much more for the process and the learning that I get through the process than the final product. I think in the same way, I have to try to see when people in my life are difficult, when they're experiencing hurt, I want to be able to see people in process and be okay with that, and not try to rush to the next step. God is obviously working on everybody, working on me, and I'm very much in process too. That's the other challenge, is how do I see people in process and really see that is so beautiful, and that's the potter working actively. And that in itself is beautiful. It doesn't need to be finished. The process itself is a really beautiful thing.